Hi, my name is Steve Mulberry with GISinc, and today I want to talk to you about some technologies that you may or may not be familiar with, or even how to implement them within inside of the ArcGIS system, and that's webhooks, application links, and eURLs. So let's get started. I want to begin by sort of talking about what these mean to you and how to incorporate them within inside of the ArcGIS system. We'll start off with webhooks. Think of webhooks as a way to either augment or alter the behavior between applications or between web pages. And this technology allows the calling application to sit there and sort of listen for information instead of constantly polling the other application for information or data, which is a lot nicer to sit there and listen instead of constantly having to poll for information. And this can be done within ArcGIS, so within different components of the ArcGIS system or within other third-party applications. An example of this would be using Survey123 to trigger activity inside, say, Outlook calendar, set up a activity event, or send an email, or send a SMS text message, and things like that. Application links is an open standard, and I guess both webhooks and app links are open standards, but think of application links as communicating between native applications running on your smartphone. So from one application to the other application. Again, this could be within inside of the ArcGIS system of ecosystem of tools and applications, or it could be with third-party applications, and it does this by extending the metadata associated with URLs that are being used to communicate between the different applications. You might be familiar with this if you've used Collector, and from a Collector reached out to Navigator to route me to a location or an asset or an item that you're looking at inside of Collector. That's application linking taking place there. And then eURL. This stands for Enterprise URL. This is a CityWorks branded technology. The underlying capabilities is open technology, but CityWorks embeds this inside of their asset and permitting management system. If you're familiar with that environment, it allows you to manage all of your assets and permits in a platform that sits right on top of the ArcGIS system. And it does this by, when you create a search, that search then is a URL-based search in a JSON representation that you can then send to an ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise or another application within the ecosystem there. And this is really neat. Now, if you look at this from a holistic point of view, have you ever heard the term deep linking? This is what they're talking about. They're using webhooks or application links or eURLs to communicate or augment or alter behavior from one application to another application, sending information from this application to another one to continue your workflow or to continue your use within inside of your device that you're running from. So let's look a little bit deeper in here. Let's start off with Survey123. So if we look at this application, we want to be able to take Survey123 and trigger or automate some other activity in another application. This is all done through the HTTP post call, and I can do things like trigger an email or send a text message or post information on a social media site, or maybe do some data recording in a third-party application. And this is done by using connector providers. Here I have a few of them listed out there. I'm going to focus on Microsoft's Power Automate for this example, but you can see some other ones that are out there that you can also leverage. So think of this as, if I take Survey123 and I want to trigger and create an event inside of my Outlook calendar, I use Power Automate to create that webhook that Outlook, that the calendar is listening for information coming from Survey123. Now I could extend it and use one of the hundreds of other different connector providers out there, all the Office 360 connectors out there, or other vendors that are providing different types of connectors that you can use webhooks to communicate with. Let's take an example here. Look at an example. So on the left side of this screen, I have a Survey123 that I've created. It's a simple survey. It's called Sample Webhooks, and I've got 3 items. One to establish my location, one to establish a pickup type, and here this could represent trash. I'm either picking up a can, a container, or a bulk item. And then another item to select a pickup time. Now I've hard coded some information in here for the demo, but you can kind of see how this is going to work. I want to use this to pass information on. So I save and publish this survey. This is what it's going to look like. This sample survey with 3 elements attached to it. And I want to get this information over to Outlook. Now we do this by using Microsoft Power Automate. And here I am inside of Power Automate, and I can hit create to start this new flow creation. And there's different ways of creating these flows inside of Power Automate, but here, start the process. I'm going to give it a simple name, and then I'm going to search for that trigger. And if I just start typing in survey 123, you'll see that there's already a built-in trigger to allow me to connect to a survey that I've created inside of ArcGIS Online. And all I need to do is establish that unique ID. Grab that ID from that survey. And you can do that by going to your survey's endpoint and grabbing that unique ID number. And that's what you're going to use to then communicate from Microsoft Power Automate to that survey. And then at that point, you just start adding more triggers or more activity or more actions. And again, grabbing from all the different providers out there, the connectors and options. And there's literally hundreds of them out there. I'm going to go back to one that I've already created called Survey to Outlook. And I'm going to edit that. And you'll see here that I've established my connection to my survey by applying that unique ID. And then after that, I'm just going to provide some actions. Here I want to make sure I'm in the correct time zone. I want to send an email alert. And I also want to create that event inside of Outlook. So I've got those actions here set up, those steps. Over here on the right, you see I have my Outlook calendar opened up to that day when I created this demo here. And I want to use that survey to trigger some activity. So here we go to that survey. I'm going to establish my location. So I start that process off here, get that Latin long, pick my pickup type, use the default values here for my scheduled pickup time and date, and hit submit. So now that webhook over in Outlook is listening for information calling from that survey. And you'll see here, it'll automatically create that event inside of my Outlook calendar. But we also said to trigger an email alert as well. So maybe you want to notify the dispatch that, hey, now you've got this new bulk item scheduled for pickup on this date and time. All right, so that's the power of webhooks, allowing you to communicate from one application to another application. Let's look at Arctis Enterprise and how webhooks might be used within this environment. Again, we can use webhooks to trigger these events or automation flows. Maybe I want to monitor all the activity that's taking place within inside of Arctis Enterprise. The communication is still the same. I use an HTTPS request. So I'm going to set up a link between Enterprise and one of my connector providers, and I'm going to use HTTPS request to do that. But I can monitor the activity for items, when items are added or removed or updated or shared or unshared or published, with any of those actions that I can take, or those events that I can look for. I can look at groups, users, and roles. All of these elements inside of Arctis Enterprise, I can monitor their activity, and I can produce this payload, which then allows me to communicate to Arctis Enterprise. Now, Arctis Enterprise gives you 3 ways. There's an SDK that comes with it, and if you're familiar with creating Java servlet components, you can do that. You can use one of the third-party providers that we talked about. I'm going to use Power Automate for this example. Or Enterprise also comes with a custom web service using Node.js. So if you're familiar with that platform, you can use that. But similar to how I use Survey 123 to create an event in Outlook Calendar, I'm going to use Power Automate to trigger an email alert when something happens inside, when some kind of activity takes place inside of Arctis Enterprise. Now, one thing to note down here at the bottom, to get started using webhooks inside of Arctis Enterprise, you have to go to the REST endpoint of the sharing URL inside your portal. That's how you get access to this. So we're going to look at this demo here. So I'm at my URL for my portal home. And at the end there, I'm going to take off home. I'm going to put sharing REST at the end there. And when I get access to this URL, I'm just going to click on my organization ID and then scroll all the way down to the bottom for all the action items and resources. I'm going to click on webhooks. And this is where you're going to be able to create and manage your webhooks. So here I'm going to create a webhook. And it's real simple. All you have to do is create a name, assign it a payload. You can pass over some other secret type of operation or information to provide in that URL. And so here I'm just going to give it a quick name. I'm going to leave everything else default. But what I want to fill out here is what trigger do I want to look for? In this case, I want to monitor the activity for any items that are created. So now let's create that payload, and that's done on the webhooks side. So I'm back into Microsoft Power Automate. I'm going to create a new flow, and here I'm going to give it a name and start that process. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to create an HTTPS request. All right, that's the communication protocol between these two systems, and it does this through a JSON payload, a JSON format payload. Now what's nice is that Esri's already given us a sample. So go to Create Manage Webhooks, write the documentation, scroll down about halfway to the page here, and you'll see that there's a nice little sample payload that you can just copy and paste. So we're going to grab this sample JSON payload, copy and paste it into my HTTP request. When I'm done here, I can start to add in those other actions, those other items, those other triggers, right? So here I've got my payload. I can add in my next step. In this case, I want to send an email alert when anything changes or happens within the items. So I'll search for email. Again, there's lots of different things, lots of different connectors and providers out there that you can use. Email, since I'm attached to my corporate email account, I can just start typing in a name. I'll get that user out there. You notice here when I click on subject, I can actually use one of those parameters inside of that payload, because that payload's already been established. Here I'm just going to type in some text, but for the operation or the options here, I want to actually get access to one of those parameters inside that payload, and that's the operation. I want to know what's happening. Was there something added, something deleted, something removed? All right, what's happening there? So I'm going to grab the operation event out of that payload, attach that as a step inside this process. And once I do that, hit save here, you'll see that payload URL is then created for me automatically. All I have to do is copy that payload, go back to my webhooks creation page here, paste that in there, and now I'm done. I got my name, my payload, my defaults, and that trigger, right? That activity that I'm looking for. Here I'm just going to say return the response as JSON, create webhook, and here I want to make sure that that success was true. If that's false up there, then I want to fix before I move on. But I've got that in place here, and in fact what I'll do is I'll just go back a couple steps here and show you and refresh that. Now I've got this new webhook created, and this is where I can manage all my webhooks. So I got my webhook in place. I've got it attached to my Arctis Enterprise, logged into my portal, and I also have my email up and running. Here you can see nothing in here right now. So let's trigger some activity. Let's go to add a new item. I'm just going to go out and browse my computer, find a data set here. It could be anything, this is for a demo here. And I'm going to start that process. And just because I started this process of adding a new item, Arctis Enterprise already sent a trigger. Right, my webhook over there in Outlook is already listening for information coming from Arctis Enterprise. Now I could continue this process, but I don't have to. I can just jump right over to my email and I can see I've got this alert coming from Enterprise saying that someone's trying to add something right now. So you can imagine I could extend that to say who's adding something and what are they adding, right? So if I go back to my content inside of Portal, even if I just cancel this, don't finish this process, just cancel this, again, Enterprise triggered an event that, hey, someone now is removing an item. So I got that email alert. There's the notification of that operation saying an item was just deleted. So you can kind of see where you could take this from an enterprise perspective of adding activity for who's adding or who's deleting or who's changing parameters with items or users or groups and things like that. Okay, let's go to application links. So think of application links as a way of passing the state between one application to another application. And this is a very common workflow that we do on a regular basis. Think of it when you go to your phone and you look up your contacts and you find someone that you want to call and you hit the phone button within your contacts. Well, that's at one application, right? The state of that application is changing. You're going to pass that state to another application, which is actually going to dial now that phone. So you've activated your phone application, passing over that number, that contact, and that phone now executes that. Esri works the same way within its ecosystem here. It's based off of URL schemas. And now there's plenty out there. iOS has one, Android, BlackBerry, Windows. They all have their own URL schema that they use to talk between their applications. But Esri has standardized on the iOS style. So it doesn't matter. You can always rest assured that it's going to be the same, the standard URL schema that's being used to pass information between one application and the other application. So if you've ever used, say, Arctis Explorer, and you've wanted to get driving directions to an item that you're looking at inside of Explorer and triggered that activity, well, that's that URL schema calling Navigator, passing over some information, which then tells Navigator where to go to start routing you to that item or that thing that you've clicked on inside of Explorer. Let's take a look at how this works. So here I've got an application. I'm inside Explorer, simple application. I've got some assets out here, some work orders that I'm working with. If I zoom in and click on one of these items, you can see there's two items here. One's a reported link, one's an assignment called test. If I click on that reported link, I can see the details for that. If I click on directions, you'll see Navigator automatically open up and build that route to that item from my current location. So let's watch that again. Here I'm inside of Explorer. Okay, I can click on any one of these items inside that map. When I get to the details of that, in this case, the reported link, and as soon as I click on the directions, it's going to take that information and pass that location of that item over to Navigator. Navigator is going to pick it up, recognize that I want to build a route, find my current location, and then build that route for me. And this is how Esri has been working between its applications, using application links to talk from Explorer to Navigator, or Collector to Survey 123, or Survey 123 to Indoors. However it is, between these applications, application links help us generate that communication, that state change between one application and the other application. Now, that's neat and all. This has been going on for quite some time, but if you're not aware, Esri has released its new mobile application, field application called Arctis Field Maps, where they're taking a collection of tools in Collector and Explorer and Tracker and Navigator and Workforce and moving them all over into one application. Right now, to date, all the capabilities that are in Collector, Explorer, and Tracker are now sitting inside of Arctis Field Maps, which makes it so much nicer that I have one application now that I can use for several activities based on my named user and the things that I need to do while I'm in the field. Now, right now, that's what's available there. Over this year and next year, Navigator and Workforce will make its way into Arctis Field Maps. But one thing to note here, well, actually two things. The first one is that because Collector, Explorer, and Tracker are now, those capabilities and functions are now built into ArcGIS Field Maps, those three applications are deprecated. So as of 12/20/21 here, those applications will be considered deprecated. And then as soon as the capabilities of Navigator and Workforce make its way into Arctis Field Maps, then those two applications will be deprecated, which rightly so, right? We want to make sure, we don't want to have all these different applications out there we got to worry about. Now we just have one and we can leverage it the way we need to. Also, application links work the same way. So if you're a developer out there and you want to use field maps to then trigger something else in a native app that you're building or another third-party application, great. Application links and webhooks will still be supported moving forward within ArcGIS Field Maps. All right, the last one here. Let's talk about eURL. We mentioned that this stands for Enterprise URL. It's a way to save searches inside of CityWorks that are directly tied to information and data. So you basically create these searches that are tied to records of information. It builds this REST-based feature service link inside of CityWorks that then you can send to Arctis Online or Arctis Enterprise to show dots in a map, or show those work orders, or show those service requests, or whatever you're mapping and managing inside of CityWorks. So let's take a look at that. We're going to look at my CityWorks dashboard here. I'm connected to my CityWorks dashboard. So I'm going to go into a search inside of my new work order, and I'm going to just generate a search. Now, you can see there's lots of options here for me to build this search out, but what I'm interested in are all the open work orders inside of my water department. So here I'm collecting all the information inside my water department. I jump down to the closed status, and I just want to make sure that's set to no. And this will should then give me a list of all the open work orders assigned to my group, in this case, water. And I can test that out. And if I see that, yes, this is giving me back all the information that I'm after, which it is, and I can scroll through here and make sure it's going well. It's got, in this case, it got about 110 records of information. I can then save that, and by saving that, then gives me the ability to extend the use of that. So here I'm just going to quickly save that, and what's important to know is that I can secure this search. So I can assign it to a specific employee. I can share that with domains and groups and users inside of my CityWorks environment, which then it gives me the ability to expose that out to the ArcGIS world. So here I've saved it. And if I go back to my saved searches now inside of that new work order process here, we'll just jump down to save searches. You'll see that top one here is my open work orders I'm going to send to ArcGIS Online. You'll notice that it has my eURL over here set to true, which means I can click on that service link right there, and it'll give me the endpoint to that REST-based feature service. And all I have to do is copy and paste this URL, and then I can use that inside of either the ArcGIS Online world or Arctis Enterprise. So here, let's go over to, I'm connected to ArcGIS Online. I'm going to go and add a new layer from the web. I paste in my feature service endpoint. You'll see it automatically zoom to the extent of the data that was saved in that search for all the open work orders associated with the water group. And now that it's a feature service inside this web map, I can treat it just like any other feature service. I can change the symbology, I can configure the pop-ups, labeling, legend, whatever I want to do. I can look at the record count, the table structure here, and I can take this information then, and once I get it set up, I can save that and put it into a thing like a story map or a dashboard. So here's a dashboard of that same information, which now shows me the sort of the holistic view of what's happening in this area for open work orders in my water group. And I can configure all the different elements over there for bar charts and all the different types of elements that I have access to in the dashboard. So you can kind of see how this concept of creating this eURL from CityWorks, I can expose that information. So anytime any work order is updated or changed or added or deleted, then that information is portrayed here nicely within inside my dashboard. So let's go and do a quick recap here. Webhooks allow me to augment or alter behavior between applications, right? Web pages or applications. It's sitting there listening for information to be sent to me. I don't have to sit there and pull information all the time. I can communicate from ArcGIS to other third-party applications like the example that I showed you. Application links, it gives me the ability to extend or save and pass over the state of one application to another application. ArcGIS to ArcGIS or other third-party applications. That does this again by extending the metadata within that URL. And then finally, eURLs. This is that enterprise URL that CityWorks uses. It's within its technology. It basically allows you to save those searches and then send that information over to the ArcGIS, whether it's online or enterprise, via that JSON representation, right? That URL-based REST endpoint. So some really nice technologies here. They've been in play for quite some time within Arctis Enterprise, within Survey 123 and others. So if you haven't yet taken a look at these, you might want to take some time, look at, there's lots of good documentation out there that you can use. If you need any help getting started or learning more about how to leverage either one of these technologies, please reach out to myself. steve.mulberry@gisinc.com, or just go right to our webpage and look at some of the other ways some of our customers are leveraging this technology. So thank you again so much for joining my presentation, and look forward to talking to you. Thank you.